Well, good morning, everyone. I think we can gradually start. And welcome to this breakout group session. I know this room is not as comfortable as the one upstairs, but thank you so much for participating. We are very pleased to have you with us, both in person and some of colleagues are online. And we look forward to a rich and open exchange of views like what we did yesterday. And this is a space for the collective learning, knowledge exchange, and also collaboration. And we encourage everyone to actively participate and sharing experiences, challenges, and ideas. And your input is highly valued and will directly contribute to the outcome of this event, just as we did the report back this morning, and all of your inputs will be captured and be the input to our final report of this global dialogue, the seventh global dialogue. And we also have, as you saw in the sitting session yesterday, a number of experts who have joined us in person and virtually. And we would like to encourage you all to take advantages of this presence of this expert. And a quick note for our virtual participants. To request the floor, please enter the name of the party or organization you represent and followed by your name, so which will be the party name or organization name / your name. And once you are given the floor, please unmute yourself, and for the rest of the time, please mute yourself for others to have a clear understanding of what has happened here. And of course, you can raise your virtual hands to ask for the floor. And we will also encourage the virtual participants to take an active role in this conversation today, and we will be keeping our eyes on the virtual meeting in case any one of you wish to take the floor. And we hope this session will be as conductive as yesterday. The guiding questions for this group, I think, will be shown on the screen. We also have two guiding questions for this group. The first one is, what are the best practice and actionable solutions from your national or regional experiences with respect to governance and policy framework, including but not limited to the integrating industrial decarbonization into a broader national strategy and plans that have proven effective in enabling and implementing mitigation action in industries, and what lessons has emerged from this application. This is more about the governance policy side. And second one is what related challenges and barriers have arisen in practice, and what practical solutions or approaches have helped or could help to address these challenges and barriers. So this is also about the governance and policy side. To help get the conversation started, we are also pleased to have keynote icebreaker in this room, and who will offer brief reflections on these guiding questions to set the tones and help ease us into the discussion. So we would like to invite Muslim Anshari, you just call Anshari. I don't know your the full name. Muslim Anshari, I just call you Anshari. Bin Rahman, the director and policy analytics from the Engine Zero. Please, you have the floor, Anshari.
Thanks, Gao. I usually refer myself as Anshari, so you're right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Anshari from Gen Zero. Thank you for having me. Thank you also to the Mitigation Work Plan co-chairs for an excellent run of events yesterday. I learned a lot from all the policy discussions. But let me start by introducing Gen Zero. We are a young investment firm based in Singapore. We are only 4 years old, solely owned by Temasek. And our mandate is to invest in decarbonization solutions across technology, nature, and carbon markets. And we are double bottom line, so we have to deliver both financial returns and also climate impact across our investments. We have a global mandate, and we've currently got about 20-odd investments in about 20-odd countries in both developed and developing markets. I would like to take this opportunity to offer an investor lens for this breakout session because the governance and policy conversation can look quite different depending on where you sit. The operating environment, the reality today has tightened and it's increasingly quite challenging for investors like us to deploy capital. Right, and I want to share some short observations and how this translates to stickiness of policy and policy clarity and predictability that investors like us hope to see from governments. So the first point is that capital really hasn't left climate, but it is consolidating around maturity. Let me clarify. Sideline climate, that's a data based on the different capital deployed across different stages of how mature a company is. They've done some studies. Seed and Series A year on year has gone down, capital deployed in Seed and Series A by about 10% year on year. So capital deployed to Series B or Series C company, which are growth stage companies, is down by 9% year on year. But mature growth stage investments up by 78% last year, right? So money is actually, capital is moving decisively into later stage commercially proven assets with a near-term line of sight to returns. For Gen Zero itself, we started out focusing more on growth stage technologies to differentiate ourselves. Technologies such as carbon capture, sustainable aviation fuels, but now we are starting to move into more mature technologies such as grid infrastructure, renewables, solar, and transition related. And primarily, this is a trend that we are also observing, that capital is being deployed where the value proposition is not just decarbonization per se, but where it intersects with affordability, energy resilience, and energy security. And what this means for the team that we are discussing today is quite important because the appetite to pay a green premium has actually thinned. So investors, corporate off-takers, and public budgets are less willing to subsidize the difference between a conventional product and a lower carbon one purely on climate grounds. And so policies and regulations for hard-to-abate industries need to be designed with that reality in mind. I'll ground this with an investment that we've actually made in a low-carbon cement company. So we've invested last year in Terra CO2, which is a low-carbon cement company. They closed a $120 million Series B round last year to build their first commercial facility. The technology itself is actually worth understanding. So cement produces roughly a ton of CO2 for every ton manufactured and accounts for about 8% of global emissions. And the challenge is around limestone. What Terra CO2 does is actually use alternate silicate rocks, granites, basalt, sands that exist everywhere. Concrete is needed. And they mill these raw materials and form them into glassy powder that forms as a drop-in replacement for Portland cement. Right? Their first product actually replaces up to 50% of Portland cement that's conventionally used today, with each ton replaced delivering around a 70% CO2 reduction and a 90% NOx reduction. But this is the part that matters. Terra's business model is to deliver materials that the market would purchase on cost and performance, right? And even if there was no carbon benefit. So yes, there was a significant decarbonization impact from low carbon cement, but what allowed them to be commercially viable is to offer products that would be affordable and can perform. So the raw materials are also cheaper. The plants that they set up sit near customer sites and therefore cutting transport. And it is a drop-in solution that integrates into existing operations. So this is the model that we observe currently scales, at least in the near term, given the broader macro backdrop. and governance and policy frameworks, industrial decarbonization strategies, procurement standards, technology roadmaps. They do increasingly need to support technologies where the decarbonization scales with commercial adoption rather than against it. That doesn't mean that Gen Zero as an investment firm doesn't invest in some of the more nascent technologies. So in hard-to-abate sectors like aviation, we do invest heavily in SAF, sustainable aviation fuels. And the challenge is SAF per ton is a lot more costly compared to conventional jet fuel, right? So how do we breach the green premium gap? It is through market-based mechanisms. So within the SAF space, there is this book and claim initiative where SAF certificates can actually be traded, right? And the claims are then being used where it is not feasible or too costly to actually uplift SAF in a particular airport. The market is very nascent, and we've had to work with the ecosystem and other partners, including think tanks, governments, and also industry leaders to actually build demand, right? So in collaboration with the World Economic Forum, last year we set up the Green Fuels Forward initiative, which we initially envisioned to facilitate transactions on sustainable aviation fuel, but we realized that the first step was capacity building, right? Corporates who are interested in this space, they wanted to know more about the technology, about the costs, about the solutions, and how this book and claim system works. And so we work to start off just with a capacity building mandate, but with a view that there will be a transaction, a test purchase for SAF and SAF certificates either this year or next year. To date, it has grown. Again, against the broader macro backdrop, it has grown. Today, we've got about 40 members, including airlines, aviation companies, and corporates who are participating in this initiative, right? And there are SAF mandates from EU, in Asia, also in China, SAF targets in Singapore, the SAF levy, which do provide that very much needed policy signals to bridge some of these green premiums that we are seeing in the SAF market. So that's my second point. The third point is around policy stickiness and market mechanisms for what isn't yet at parity, right? So for technologies, and I've described such as SAF in hard-to-abate sectors, for technologies that aren't yet at the level of commercial parity, in the case, in our investment case in Terra CO2, right? The green premium still exists, and there can be solutions to bridge it. Investors can underwrite technology risks, but it is quite challenging for us to underwrite policy risks. And when rules change mid-cycle, unfortunately, a lot of pilots don't actually make it to commercial scale. So the encouraging news, including across the run of the past couple of years, to as most recently as yesterday afternoon, we are seeing positive examples of sticky, long roadmaps and policies creating durable demand signals. I've mentioned SAF mandates. I'm also quite pleased, at least for the EU, the most recent news is that they will stay course on the SAF mandates, which is very encouraging for the SAF industry, right? In China, there is a SAF target, and we see the 5-year plan kind of maintain the momentum, the latest momentum around this. So it's very encouraging for us. But I would like to touch a bit more around market-based mechanisms as a lever that governments can use to bridge this green premium gap. So carbon pricing schemes, and this was mentioned earlier in the chair's summary, carbon taxes or emissions trading schemes are quite important to provide that price signals to support transition towards a low carbon economy, right? For developed economies, I think the use of Article 6 or judicious use of the voluntary carbon market can help on technology transfer, scale up technology solutions in the global south, and also potentially crowding new investments and climate financing into much needed technology scale up in the global south. So these are levers that developed economies, particularly jurisdictions with high carbon prices, can use to introduce flexibility. And we are seeing some signs across various policies worldwide. One example is the Singapore carbon tax. Currently, it allows for 5% use of international credits under Article 6 for companies exposed to carbon tax to surrender. That will then be used towards the NDC. So I think these are policy levers that governments can use, particularly, again, I repeat, against the broader macro backdrop today, where there's huge levels of uncertainty. For developing economies, we are seeing a significant uptick in terms of interest and preparedness in market-based mechanisms. Understandably, a lot of new carbon pricing schemes in developed economies, particularly in Asia, they will start out with a low carbon price, right? And I think there are considerations around competitiveness and how this can potentially scale up. What's important for us as investors is the long-term trajectory and stickiness of the regulations. We can understand if there are near-term delays or some measures to boost competitiveness or reduce burden on industries, but I think as a whole, how the policy integrates within the NDC, how the policy integrates within the long-term low emissions development strategies are very important due diligence signals for us to invest in a particular technology or in a particular solution in a country, right? And surprisingly, my background in my past life was in Article 6. And we used to think Article 6 was a silver bullet to solve everything that we had issues with. But actually, the silver bullet in Paris Agreement was Article 13, which is transparency. And now sitting in the investment space, when we do diligence on country policies, the level of readiness in terms of a country's ability to communicate their policies transparently under their NDC is highly important. Because if we invest in a solution and projects, we need to know that this would have strong governance and policy support from the government, not just near term, but in the long term. Right? And in the carbon market space, it helps with the assessment around what is additional to the NDC. The country's preparedness and ability to report on a regular basis, whether it's Article 6 or Article 13, is also another bellwether for how we measure the readiness of the country in terms of honoring its commitments on corresponding adjustments or LOAs, or just in terms of tracking the projects and solutions that are within its jurisdiction. I've spoken a lot, and I thought I'd just like to conclude by saying I think today, probably my fourth time saying against the broader macro backdrop, we should start to think about how market-based mechanisms can potentially crowd in carbon finance into the capital stack and materially improve unit economics. And it's quite important now for a lot of the companies with low carbon solutions, particularly in the startup phase, that governments can play a role to close the green premium gap where technologies move down their cost curve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, for sharing with us the thinking. So I would like now to open the floor for any interventions from the floor and also from our online participants. Please, that's what we did yesterday. If you have any interventions, please just go to the microphone. Belgium, please.
So good morning, everyone. I can see humans are habit animals because I see very familiar faces in this room compared to yesterday. In a very familiar seating setup as well. So It feels good to be back, I would say. So good morning, and thanks a lot for this icebreaker. I think it was very interesting for me, very good to hear. It speaks to a few elements I actually was planning to bring up in the next session, which is still a bit more focused on finance. But I think on the one hand, very good to hear that finance is moving more towards mature technologies, because in the end, that's what we need to scale. Definitely when talking about the more established technologies already, like electrification, also in transport, electricity production, etc. That's a very good signal, because that's exactly where we need to be. Sometimes in decarbonization of industry, especially the hard-to-abate industries, of course, that's more challenging, as addressed yesterday, because, of course, their technologies still have to mature. And we do indeed also, as already said yesterday, struggle with that green premium and the willingness to pay in that regard. We're also in Europe, we see that actually quite a few projects which are designed, set up, struggle to reach the final investment decision, exactly because of the long-term return on investment concerns, because of all the barriers we basically spoke to yesterday. So, a lot resonated in your talk, and very good to hear. When we then talk about the role of policies and governance in general, also there very much hear what you said in terms of the importance of whole of government, whole of society, integrated long-term planning, and sending stable signals to investors, basically, that reduce the risk on the long-term horizon, and kind of can compensate for that green premium in certain ways. There are several policies with regards to that we have in the European Union to address this, but I feel that I actually already elaborated a bit on them yesterday, so maybe I shouldn't go too much into repetition. What I didn't talk to yesterday yet, but what you also mentioned, is actually the role that we see for NDCs in this regard, as really providing kind of the chapeau, the cross-cutting direction of travel of a country, in which then basically all other policy frameworks can be anchored. And that's where we see there very much the role of sending, as you said, a signal to markets of a direction of travel, and NDCs as a basis for unlocking finance and business opportunities. But of course, only if NDCs are also anchored in then policy making that follows up, and that can be translated in also long-term national investment plans that can make the NDC targets a reality. In the EU, we have set this up with regards to the NDC that runs until 2030 with the Fit for 55 policy framework. Fit for 55 because we have a minus 55% target by 2030. And that's really the heading under which a lot of different policies and regulations fall. Several of those already discussed yesterday. There's many more. And as I said, I don't feel the need to repeat everything. Now that we have a legally binding 2040 target, minus 90%, on which basis the 2035 NDC is deducted, we will also start to work on elaborating a Fit for 90 policy framework in the same fashion. That has to give exactly transparency and a long-term perspective until 2040. And of course, we have the net zero as a also legally binding target by 2050, in that way aiming to give stability for investors. With regards to closing the green premium gap, or making green investments, again, there also from the use perspective, very important, as you mentioned, the carbon pricing, where we have the ETS within the EU as used, as said yesterday, and indeed also the ETS is used as a ways to actually source funds that can then be invested in the green transition. So we very much think that that's indeed the way to go, that the green premium gap can be closed by putting a price on carbon, and we are also very much willing to work with partners around the globe on carbon pricing and expanding systems. Maybe just one very short example I could still give within the Fit for 55 policy framework. As I said, there's a lot of policies that fall under this, and those are often geared to targeting a specific problem we see. For example, yesterday we talked about the importance of infrastructure and among others, the gap in electricity networks, the cross-border connections, the storage capacity, but also the load balancing, etc. So at the moment in the EU, we're working on a new piece of legislation, which is called the Grids Package, which is exactly focused on addressing this specific challenge, among others, speeding up permitting procedures, but also making sure there is the cross-country interconnections that we need, that the infrastructure to deal with the base load power, the grid balancing, etc., are there. And yeah, many other policies I could speak to, but I'll leave it at this for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. Just want to, I didn't hear clearly, the last saying is some package, what is it called?
Grids
package. Thank you.
It's just one small example of what falls under the Fit for 55 and how then there can be specific policies and governance initiatives
And
linked
it's
to each
still,
of the barriers we talked to yesterday.
yeah, and it's still under development, and
It's-
that is to address the bottlenecks we have discussed yesterday, right?
Yeah,
Am I
so-
right? Thank you.
So that's currently under development, specifically focused on indeed electricity networks and all the electricity infrastructure that needs to be in place.
Thank you so much for sharing. And the floor is still open. Yes, please. Do that.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Just to reflect a little bit on the international global practices and experience in terms of the policy frameworks for industrial decarbonization. Three things. One is for hard-to-abate sectors like steel, cement, chemicals, petrochemicals. What we recommend is actually if your starting point is zero, you haven't done much in the country yet, then the good starting point is the roadmap. And roadmap to identify what are the technology or decarbonization levers for cement industry in that particular country, or what are the technology levers for steel sector in that particular country. And what I want to say is that the roadmap, it's extremely important that the beneficiary of the roadmap is the industry themselves. So the active engagement of steel producers or cement producers or industrial producers and associations, they should be the primary owners of that roadmap. Having said that, it is extremely important to engage the policymakers in this process. So it should be seen as a dialogue between industry, financiers, and the policymakers, and the roadmap should be basically a result of that conversation, because the idea of that roadmap is to gather internally at the national level to understand what are the technology pathways, which ones are short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And then sort of having agreed on a target and a pathway for that country to decarbonize, this would help both for the policymakers to understand what policy signals they need to set, what policy incentives that need to be put in place, but also for the financiers to understand where the investment would flow, where the industry would, how industry can decarbonize in that particular country context, using what kind of low carbon materials or pathways it can go. So that's one point. So we highly encourage that, and we also have observed that the countries that have roadmaps in place, the readiness of industry increases, because then they have a better understanding which way they want to go, and they have one voice, or like they're aligned in their voices when they ask things both from the policymakers but also from the investors and the financiers and the donor community. The second point is another international best practice. If you're in a country that does not have a strong cement industry, or that does not have like a solid steel industry, you have a different industrial landscape, you have all sorts of producers, you have food processing, garment industry, etc. So then another best practice would be, instead of targeting everybody in that particular country, target the top consumers. It's always, in the country, you will notice that there's always 10 or 20% of industrial consumers that are actually responsible for 80% of the emissions or for 80% of the energy consumption. And so sometimes it would be actually very good then to, it's like very similar to this 50-55 type of package. So you design a policy package that is only targeted to that group of industrial consumers, then it would consist both of the incentive mechanisms, but also some push and pull mechanisms, right? And having that program this program has been successfully implemented in many countries. One of the country examples is actually China, where they started with top 10,000, it can be, and the number can be whatever, it can be top 100 program targeting the top 100 industries and going to 500 industries, 1,000, etc. And the third example or what I wanted to say is that when we talk about the hard-to-abate industries and we're talking about low-carbon cement as a product or low-carbon steel as a product, and what are the policy mechanisms to pool and create lead markets. And I feel from the discussion that have been happening in different fora, that green public procurement is actually a very strong mechanism to actually pool the market and create those lead markets for those type of products. And it doesn't have to start at scale. So it is important that the countries have green frameworks to adopt green public procurement scheme. It can be piloted on certain projects. The learning, to have that learning experience, and you could implement it gradually and in phases, and starting with products where the green premium perhaps is not so big. So for example, like low carbon cement, in certain cases, there is not even a green premium there. The cost of the conventional cement and the low carbon cement, sometimes there is no difference there, but they're lagging behind because their market is not aware and there is no demand for them. And this is where the government can actually step in and create that demand, because the government is a big purchaser of cement and steel products in the market. So we do strongly encourage the countries to look into that direction as well. And the fourth point, and I'm really looking maybe, thanks a lot, Anshari, for your wonderful really opening and providing this icebreaker. For countries where the green premium there is a green premium on certain industrial products, and then it's hard to convince, if it's an emerging and developing economy, to put some money towards green public procurement. Could we think of financial solutions or Article 6 mechanisms to cover that portion of the green premium to enable the green public procurement scheme, right? So that could also be a very interesting case and pathway to look at, and to foster cooperation between developed countries and developing economies. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Nuzat, for your insight. I think this shows how UNIDO is a very specific organization focusing on the industries. Thank you so much. I think Colombia wish to take the floor, please.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving Colombia the floor again. So we would like to highlight on best practices in terms of governance, the role of institutional coordination schemes. So we have in Colombia CISCLIMA, that works through the Intersectoral Commission on Climate Change, that enables integration of industrial decarbonization targets into broader national strategies, including development, competitiveness, and climate policy. This whole of government approach has been critical to avoid fragmented action. Also, we have advanced through sectoral planning instruments, particularly the Comprehensive Climate Management Plan for the industry, which establishes clear mitigation pathways, timelines, and responsibilities for both public and private actors, and provides long-term certainty and translates national commitments under the NDC into actionable sectoral measures. A key lesson from these frameworks is that policy coherence and clear mandates across sectors are essential to move from ambition to implementation, particularly in complex sectors like industry. However, important challenges remain. One of the main barriers is the lack of standardized and interoperable information systems, which affects data quality and decision-making. Strengthening instruments such as the National Registry of Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reductions and the National Greenhouse Gas Accounting System is essential to ensure robust MRV and avoid double counting. Additionally, fragmentation across data platforms, including environmental and industrial reporting systems, limits efficiency and transparency. This highlights the need for stronger interoperability and digital integration. It's critically important to develop an integrated multi-level climate monitoring system that links planning, monitoring, and reporting, connecting national instruments such as the NDC and the NAP with territorial implementation. This should be enabled through interoperable platforms and dashboards that ensure traceability of actions, indicators, and financing. It faces challenges, particularly regarding harmonization of indicators and the institutional capacity for reporting. In terms of stakeholder engagement, the experience of the climate action technical working groups with industry associations has proven effective in standardizing methodologies. However, this governance approach needs to be expanded at the territorial level and to include stronger participation from academia. So to address all these challenges, Colombia is prioritizing these three immediate needs: the strengthening of MRV frameworks and sector-specific carbon footprint methodologies. Second, improving interoperability across information systems. And third, expanding multi-stakeholder governance spaces, such as technical roundtables with industry to ensure alignment and trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia, for sharing. I think it reminds me, I think many countries are doing similar things. Like just now, European Union says that they have a package Fit for 15. And in China, we also have what we call 1+N. I think they're quite similar. And in Colombia, you have NDC and you have the pathway for the industrial sector. And I believe you also have that for other sectors. So every country is having their sectoral or different policies to implement their NDC. As you said, that we have to turn this as ambition into implementation. This is what we need. And of course, I remember when I do the research on the EU ETS, there is also one specific direction or regulation. It's about MRV. And in China, we also have one of the regulation on MRV to support our implementation of all these policies. I think this, as you mentioned, is a challenge, and this is something that we need to address. Thank you very much for sharing. May I invite Saudi Arabia and then Dominican Republic.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Reflecting on the guiding question, Saudi Arabia would like to make the following 4 bullets that kind of highlight the best practices that we have in Kingdom. The first is mainly around institutional coordination being fundamental for implementing our climate change policies, actions, and plans. A key lessons from our Kingdom is experiences that affect climate governance require strong institutional coordination across various sectors. As such, Saudi Arabia and its designated national authority serves as the National Secretariat for Implementation of International Climate Requirements. The DNA brings together 26 members representing both government entities, semi-government institutions, and private sectors. This structure ensures that the setting of climate policies and strategies is in a bottom-up matter and takes into account the sectors responsible for implementation, particularly in energy industry, waste, and agriculture. The same entity is also structured to ensure strong alignment between national climate policies, actions, and plans, as well as international processes. This is reflected in various different pillars: the development of a domestic measurement reporting verification system, similar to what you were just mentioning, the preparation and update and coordination of the different kingdoms' NDCs, so that feeds into the NDCs, and the regulation of the carbon markets and engagement and coordination with regional and global entities on climate-related topics. The second bullet is around a strong transparency system to support the policy implementation. A key pillar for effective climate governance is the establishment of a robust transparency reporting system. In the Kingdom, this has been addressed through the development of a domestic measurement reporting verification system through this designated national authority. The domestic MRV system supports the preparation of international reports requirements, such as the biannual transparency report and the national communications within the Kingdom, and it facilitates updating and tracking of progress towards the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs. It also improves the availability of consistency of GHG emissions data across various sectors, which helps with the policy signaling for investors. The system has also been designed to align with transparency requirements of the Convention and the Paris Climate Agreement, and in doing so, it not only enables the Kingdom to meet international reporting requirements, but it also strengthens domestic policy planning by providing a more structured and reliable evidence base for decision-making. The third bullet is mainly about national climate ambition must reflect national circumstances, and this is a key consideration in governance and policy design in the need to account for national circumstances, development priorities, and economic structure. As an example, climate policies in the Kingdom are designed around a bottom-up approach aligned with national priorities, supporting economic diversification, while also advancing both mitigation co-benefits and adaptation efforts. Given the important role of the energy and industrial sectors that play in the national economy, this approach ensures that climate policy design remains closely integrated with broader economic and industrial strategy. The Kingdom's approach is guided by the circular carbon economy that was mentioned yesterday as well, which is a holistic, integrated, inclusive, and pragmatic approach into managing emissions. The CCE, the circular carbon economy approach, aims to provide new pathways toward economic growth that can be applied reflecting countries' priorities and circumstances. The fourth one is evidence-based policy making, which help in strengthening credibility. Another lesson from the Kingdom experience is the importance of technical and analytical data to support policy decisions. This ensures that policies and targets are grounded in technical analysis and sectoral inputs. Evidence-based policy making is critical for us, and technical studies and engagement with sector stakeholders help ensure that mitigation strategies are both ambitious and implementable. Now, finally, the Kingdom's approach is, rather than just simply relying on NDCs, is primarily anchored for finance and policy governance in Saudi Arabia's approach to its national. Let me rephrase that. So in order to really move away from the ambition that's in the NDCs and go into implementations, we have the Saudi 2030 vision, which provides a clearer economy-weighted direction and investment signals. The Vision 2030 translates climate-relevant ambition into sector-specific strategies, regulatory reforms, and institutional mandates, enabling more predictable policy implementation across energy, industry, and transport. This includes concrete governance mechanisms such as the national programs for energy mix diversification, regulatory support for large CCS deployment, and development of industrial clusters and shared infrastructure. By embedding these decarbonizations within broader economic transformation goals, rather than isolating them in NDC cycles, Saudi Arabia creates more stable and investable frameworks that align policy, finance, and implementation with national circumstances and our long to medium term development priorities. This is also maybe as a reflection on having specific policies that would target specific sectors of the economy. We mainly believe that energy use does not directly equate to emissions, and risk penalizing essentials, strategic sectors without delivering efficient mitigation outcomes might be challenging. Therefore, a more effective approach is aligning it to national development priorities rather than having policies really directed as specific sectors of the industry or specific sectors of the economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing the experiences and insights from the Saudi Arabian experience. And I would like now to invite colleagues from Dominican Republic, and then we will have our colleagues from Japan online, and then Russia Federation, please.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Chair, for the guiding questions. From the perspective of the Dominican Republic, we have found that effective governance and policy frameworks for industrial decarbonization are those that are fully integrated into national development planning, supported by strong institutional coordination and operationalized through transparent systems and target sectoral policies. First, a key best practice has been the mainstream of climate action into our National Development Strategy 2030, which is actually a law in the Dominican Republic, and also the National Public Investment System. This ensures that industrial decarbonization, particularly in energy-intensive sectors, is not treated as a standalone effort, but rather embedded with broader economic planning, investment decisions, and sustainable development priorities. Second, we have strengthened our governance architecture through the National Council of Climate Change work, which enables coordinated action across ministries, the private sector, and international partners. And this has been critical to align our industrial policies with our NDC targets. The Dominican Republic has made significant efforts to decarbonize its economy, as well as Colombia mentioned. We have our national determined contribution, which is committed, the last one. Right now we are updating the NDC 3.0, but from the one that is published, it has stated a goal of 27% of emissions reduction compared to a business usual scenario. And this target includes 7% of domestic finance, and 20% is conditional to international support. The Energy National Electric Plan that I mentioned yesterday, 2036, further highlights that under current trends, it emphasizes the need to scale up renewable energy, promote solar and wind investments, and deploy battery storage systems, which are also critical enablers for industrial decarbonization. Third, the establishment of our national MRV system under decree that we have nationally has been instrumental. This enhances transparency, allows us to track mitigation actions in the industrial sector, and supports evidence-based policymaking in line with the enhanced transparency framework. At the sectoral level, I mentioned yesterday some of the things that we are actually working on, like reducing clinker content in cement production, promoting the use of biomass and alternative fuels, improving energy efficiency, and advancing circular economy practices such as co-processing. These actions are supported through international cooperation and mix of financial instruments. This includes grants, loans, technical assistance, which have enabled technology transfer, capacity building, and institutional strengthening. Across multiple projects, this has supported more than tens of millions of US dollars, benefiting both national institutions and local communities, while contributing to mitigation and sustainable development. An important lesson learned is the value of integrating co-benefits, including job creations, environmental protection, resilience, as well as cross-cutting considerations such as just transition, which increase the effectiveness and acceptability of policies. However, also in practices, we have been facing several challenges. We continue to experience financial barriers, particularly the high cost of clean technologies and renewable energy, which affects the competitive of low-carbon industrial solutions. We also face capacity constraints at the national level, where municipalities have an important role in implementation, but often lack sufficient technical and financial resources. In addition, data gaps and regulatory limitations, I believe it was previously mentioned as well. These limited incentives for private sector engagement and also can slow down the adoption of mitigation measures. To address these barriers, we are advancing practical solutions, including scaling up blended finance approaches to mobilize public and private investment, strengthening our MIV and data systems. I mentioned yesterday the country is now building a platform so it will be transparent for each actor how much is advancing on their goal or in their initiative or project, expanding capacity building efforts, especially at the local level, promoting technology development and transfer through partnership with international organizations and national institutions, continuing to enhance our regulatory frameworks, including the development of the climate change law, which we only have a national climate change policy, and we're working right now to establish this law, as well as mechanisms for independent technical advice. In conclusion, our experience shows that integrated planning, strong governance, transparency systems, and international cooperations are essential to enable industrial decarbonization, while addressing as well existing barriers, and these will require sustained efforts, both private sector, public sector, and the economy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing the experience from Dominican Republic. Similarly, I think in China right now we don't have the climate change law, although we have the National Congress resolution, which is published in 2008, quite long ago, but we don't have the climate change law. But the recent development is that we have just adopted the ecological and the environmental code, which includes a chapter of climate change. And based on that, we are also developing our climate change law. I think this is, well, of course, European Union has already got the climate change law. I think it's something that we can also learn from. Thank you for sharing with us. May I invite colleagues from Japan who will speak online? I think Tsukakoshi. Please unmute yourself.
No? No. I tried to speak.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
thank you. Probably there is a little bit time lag. Still, we are close by. I'm speaking from Tokyo. Thank you for the opportunity again. From the government's perspective, I would like to convey an example of how central policies can contribute to and promote and decarbonization in best of the industry. The plan for global warming countermeasures approved by the cabinet is positioned as a central governance tool for Japan to implement and managing the progress towards our targets set under the NDC. In this plan, specifically, sector by sector and industry-specific emission reduction pathways are developed, and their progress is regularly reviewed and disclosed in public through the independent advisory councils. Through this follow-up framework of our national implementation plan, companies and industry associations are able to review how their efforts contribute to the achievement of the national targets, and this framework enhances also accountability and predictability. So we encourage the private sector to invest in decarbonization through this framework. There are three key lessons learned from this way. First, consistency between targets and follow-up is essential. Numerical targets alone are not sufficient. It needs a mechanism for monitoring progress and making adjustment over time to make the system work effectively. Second, ensuring transparency is essential. Visualizing progress creates an environment in which proactive efforts are fairly and positively recognized within the competitive business landscape. Third, continuous dialogue between government and the industry is required. Rather than relying on one-side regulation or constructive dialogues through follow-up processes, enable us to identify realistic yet ambitious decarbonization pathways. And there is also a challenge. Differences among industries in mitigation potential and cost structures, as well as technological uncertainty, can act as barriers against taking actions. So it is important to reflect outcome from the follow-ups, like the advisory council, to in policy improvement and to combine them with GX investment support, research and development assistance, and transition finance. As a conclusion, I would like to emphasize the continuous follow-ups centered on the NDC. International Implementation Plan is very effective governance tool and governance approach for the industrial decarbonization turn into concrete actions. We hope that Japan's experiences will contribute to institutional design to the respective context of other countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan, for sharing your experiences and your practice. And now I would like to invite colleagues from Russia Federation, please.
Good morning to everyone, and I'd like to thank the icebreaker for the interesting opening speech. The Russian Federation is a responsible participant in global efforts to combat climate change. According to the second NDC of the Russian Federation, Russia has committed to limiting greenhouse gas emissions to 66 of 1990 levels by 2035. And the legal basis for this work is the federal law on limiting the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. Furthermore, the low carbon development strategy sets a goal of achieving carbon neutrality no later than 2060. And speaking about governance and policy frameworks in energy sector, in industry, a number of government programs and strategies aimed at developing different available energy sources and technologies are being implemented in Russia. And the energy strategy until 2050 plans to increase the share of nuclear power generation in electricity production to 25%. Particular attention will be paid to the development of renewable energy sources. Installed capacity will grow by more than 40% from the 2023 level. And to continue the discussions about hydrogen that were held yesterday, the development of hydrogen energy in Russia is based on a comprehensive government strategy, including the hydrogen energy development concept of the Russian Federation, as well as the roadmap for the development of the high-tech direction development of hydrogen energy for the period up to 2030, and the energy strategy of the Russian Federation for the period up to 2050. So the concept defines goals for creating a hydrogen energy sector in Russia with high export potential as well. And according to the roadmap, by 2035, Russian industry should reach hydrogen production of 12 million tons per year. So in Russia, climate projects have been registered in the ferrous metallurgy sector, related to the beneficial utilization of secondary energy resources, for example, from blast furnace gas with electricity generation and improved energy efficiency in the production of rolled steel products. Russian companies are expanding their use of low-carbon electricity, applying cogeneration, and employing technologies that prevent, for example, gas flaring. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Russia Federation, for sharing with us your experiences. Let me just try to check the time. We have 1 minute left for the as scheduled. But I have, yes, just a moment. First, I would like to give our colleagues online from Sweden, Annika. Please, you have the floor.
I don't know if I can deliver this in 1 minute, but
no. We can, of course, extend the time. Good to see you,
okay,
Annika.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, good to see you too, Gao, and nice to see everybody. And thanks for all the information shared. It's very interesting dialogue, I think. These are some examples and lessons learned from Sweden, and I would like to agree with Shuri and my colleagues from the European Union about the importance of long-term national roadmaps, robust policy instruments, and also carbon pricing. The majority of industry emissions in Sweden come from the steel, cement, and petrochemical industry. That's about 30% of Swedish total emissions. And Swedish industries testify to the EU emissions trading scheme being an important driving force for their emission reductions. They also say that their customers are demanding net zero emission products and are willing to pay extra for such products. And this is a direct consequence of an increased price on emission allowances within the trading system. And one important lesson from this system is the introduction of measures to ensure that there is no large surplus of emission allowances, and thereby keeping the price at a sufficiently high level. I can also mention that many Swedish industries have set their own net zero emission targets in accordance with an initiative called Science-Based Targets Initiative. This is to ensure that they are consistent with the Paris Agreement, but also to ensure that the targets are ambitious and meaningful. There are many decarbonization projects initiated by the industry in Sweden, including fossil-free steel production, which I think you've heard about yesterday. Also CCUS and CCS within the petrochemical and mineral sector, large-scale hydrogen production, and recycling of rare earth metals. And to be able to make long-term investments, the industry in Sweden emphasize the importance of national targets for decarbonization, as well as implementation of long-term policy instruments. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika. I think it's also quite early in the midnight for you. Thank you for sharing with us the experiences from Sweden. I would like now to invite colleagues from SPRIP.
Thank you. Thank you very much, co-chairs and secretariat, for allowing us to voice a few of our perspectives as small islands, developing states, where industrial emissions are very modest and small in terms of scale, due to our scale and in terms of our geography as well, and our very limited space in how our islands are set up naturally, I presume. So I cannot complain on that. Anyways, from our experience, one of the most effective governance approaches that has been effective in the islands have been integrating industrial decarbonization into broader national strategies. And this has been done through rather treating them standalone. We've been integrating these into or embedded in our NDCs, our long-term low emission strategies, our national energy plans, and looking at our roadmaps towards green energy electrification. So forming the backbone of those industrial transition is important in making sure that these are integrated into our national strategies, as many of our colleagues in this room has mentioned. Also, SIDS have learned the importance of making sure the prioritization of overcoverage, and that saying that is, rather than attempting decarbonization of all industrial activities at once, we focus on small numbers of where we have high impacts, and that is looking at food processing. As I mentioned before, we're quite small in scale, looking at construction materials, looking at desalination, looking at waste to energy opportunities. So all these are within our reach in terms of our resources that's available to us. And this allows us to deploy limited resources in a very strategic way, but also looking at piloting solutions that are fit for purpose, fit for our context, that are able to solve our solutions, our problems in the end. Thirdly, I wanted to share one of the important aspects that we now try to roll out is public sector leadership, and that is, it's very essential. I hear that some of our colleagues has mentioned the importance of creating the market, but creating a market that's fit for purpose is what we're being advocating. We can create the market, but we make sure we both have consumers and suppliers at the same time as well. We often have challenges in policies, and not just on market distortion, but also on the market absence, as I mentioned before in some of my examples. Regional cooperation, as I mentioned before, we have that challenge to scale, so we try and come in as a region. And when I say as a region, I take for example as the Pacific region, we look for technologies that are able to sustain us in the long run. And if a cyclone hits us, that are able to give us that, disaster relief on time for our people as well. we continue to face barriers, and that's something that we all face as well in terms of infrastructure gaps, in terms of grid stability or grid capacity, fragmented low carbon product markets, financial constraints, financial resources, all that. Lastly, the perspective of SIDS, and we continue to voice this as well, is that we need a just transition in a way that it is people-centered and a way that it helps drive the solution towards a low-carbon economy for everyone and for all, that benefits everyone and for all as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for sharing with us the experience from small islands. I think to mainstream the climate change or decarbonization of industry into the national development strategy is also highlighted by many others, and also the practice in my own country. And you also mentioned to focus more on some of the industries like the food process. I think it's similar like what Nuzat just mentioned, that but her point is to focusing on those top consumers. I think they are in fact in line with each other. Thank you so much. Are there any further interventions? As Cook Islands? Costa Rica, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, for Costa Rica, finance, technology transfer, and capacity building need to work together if we want to turn mitigation ambition into real action. In our NDC, we organized our contribution into two types, unconditional and conditional. This helps us show which actions we can move forward ourselves and which ones still need international support. At the moment, Costa Rica is also developing, with the support of the NDC partnership, a consultancy to help identify financial mechanisms with international partners so that we can achieve all of our mitigation goals. For us, this is not only about traditional cooperation. We are looking at a broad range of environmental and climate finance options, including payments for environmental services, banking, international cooperation, the Green Climate Fund, Article 6, and other possible mechanisms. At the same time, we are also exploring opportunities to strengthen the capacity of our climate change team and of the Ministry of Environment and Energy in key areas related to climate action. We also believe that finance alone is not enough. We need technology transfer and capacity building as well, so that support can lead to real implementation and real results. So our message is that these three elements should be addressed together in a practical way and in line with each country's needs and priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Costa Rica, for sharing with us. And would you mind to identify yourself? Thank you.
Yes, good morning. I'm Bernd from WWF, the ENGO constituency. Let me first, I have 3 points. I'll try to be brief. Let me first comment on the great introduction, the icebreaker from Anshar. I think you argued that the private investors have become a little bit more risk adverse, a little bit more conservative, which means that we have somebody else then should kind of cover the risk. The dilemma, of course, in many countries, I think almost all countries, is that taxpayers are also risk adverse. They don't want to take the big risks. So this is really something that we should address together. I think the German example of carbon contracts for difference is one solution. I think it has delivered some nice results in Germany. But I also urge, I think, the private investors to also consider the risk and also the future profits. I mean, it has to be a balance. So I think we also need the private investors to bear some of the risks. The second point is about green premium, also kind of inspired by your intervention. So green premium is, of course, the difference between low carbon and high carbon products. And the difference can be mitigated in different ways. So, of course, one important way is the carbon pricing. But the other very important point that I think it has been mentioned here today and also yesterday, I'm very happy of that, is that many of the decarbonization technologies are based on electricity. So power price is a very, very important mechanism to lower the cost of the low carbon alternatives. And we see it also in, for instance, in the European Union with the ETS. The most affordable power is the one produced by solar and wind. So I think investing in solar and wind will also reduce the premium. My third point, I think a very important points have been raised about the MRV and the data availability. I want again to make a link to emission trading schemes, cap and trade schemes, because they are based on also robust reporting from the industries who have to get the emission allowances. So you can kind of, by developing a cap and trade emission trading scheme, you can both lay the ground for reporting and data availability. We have the annual emissions from every industrial facility in the whole Europe. It's public because they have to produce the data in order to comply with the ETS. So I think these three points, from a global perspective, again, I don't represent any specific geography. We are a global network, but these are reflections about some of the important steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing from the aspects of the angle. And yes, it reminds me something that I would like to comment on. Yes, we are also doing some research together with UBA and Eco Institute of Germany to think about, because after the scale up of the China's ETS, that will cover 80% of our emission. So we will have industrial level emission data, and we try to think how to link that together with our national inventory. I think this is some experiment we are doing. I think this is also very important point. Thank you so much. And I also want to respond a little bit on the MRV system. Just now, I think colleagues from Colombia mentioned that we need to have our, based on this data system, we need to have our national plan, monitoring, reporting system together. And that reminds me my negotiation in the CBD, biodiversity area. We have the PMRR together, the planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. We have that as one category. I think this is also very important. But in climate change, of course, we have planning is more about NDC, and the rest of them are transparency. So maybe we can think about how to link them, at least not to combine, but link them together. So thank you so much for a lot of information shared. I think we come to the time. Yes, we are 15 minutes beyond our schedule. So coffee break we will have, and I think we can start by 11:20. 11:20. Let's try 11:20. Thank you so much.
Breakout? Yeah, so it's nice to meet you in person. Yeah. I was on the call, the prep call, what was it, last week, I guess.
The icebreaker. It was a very long and good conversation.
That was a very involved conversation.
That was really long. How was it? Okay. Good.
So should I just set my... Oh, I didn't do it.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll get you a coffee later, but yeah, everything.
See what we can do. Should I set up here then?
Yes.
Love to feature. Yeah, so
I don't have a reaction for tonight. Staying some of these hotels.
we're in the house.
Okay, yeah, I'm just a kilometer away, so yeah. I could, yeah. Perhaps, yeah. Great.
Let me see if that can, do I hit her number?
Yes, good question. I have a tradition.
I have cards. I actually have cards now. Oh man,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah. Okay.
Things are moving.
Perfect, yeah. A lot of fun. Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, I'll send.
Yes,
I'll drop you
I'll-
a text.
yes, let's
Yeah.
try tonight.
Well, I guess we have a very interactive dialogue already happened in this room. It's very good. But I think we still need to go through our process. So welcome back to this breakout group session. We will have our second round of discussion. I don't think I need to repeat those logistic issues for our online participants because I think everyone has been familiar with this online system. And now we are going to talk about the FTC part, which is an area that I should say I'm a little bit familiar with that, especially because of the transparency report. I always do the FTC, both for China and for the review. But that's different. The real FTC for this implementation is different from just reporting. So in our room, we also have two guiding questions for this discussion. So the first one is what best practices and actionable solutions have been effectively in your country or region in mobilizing and accessing finance, including but not limited to the carbon markets. I think just now many of us has already get these experiences on carbon markets and carbon pricing, the technology development and transfer, and capacity building, including with respect to workers, skill development and just transition, and to support mitigation actions in industries in line with the national priority and the circumstances. And the second question would be, what challenges and barriers have been encountered in mobilizing and scaling finance, technology development, deployment, or capacity building, and what approaches have helped or could help to address these barriers? I think these are two guiding questions. Every participant must be very familiar with that. And similar like we did for the last session and yesterday, we invite our icebreaker in this room to trigger our discussion. So I would like to invite Michael Apsili, the head of the secretary, the Climbing Club secretary, to give us ice-breaking presentation. Please, Michael, you have the floor.
Yeah, Gao, sorry. Thanks so much for having me, and apologies to be a couple. I didn't realize you'd actually reconvened. I was waiting for like the little bell to ring or whatever, but no, please. So look, yeah, a real great pleasure to be with all of you today, and I'll keep it pretty pretty brief. You know, first of all, I think just as a sort of a macro point, the fact that this is the 7th global dialogue talking about industrial decarbonization, or that you're taking up the topic, I should say, of industrial decarbonization, really does prove, to me anyway, proof of concept that the Climate Club is doing important work here in taking on the effort to develop and expand lead markets for industrial, low carbon and near zero industrial products. And in this case, we're talking specifically about concrete, cement, and steel. Just a couple words about the Climate Club. Since our launch at COP28 in Dubai, we have grown to 48 members, which really does show the proof of concept as an inclusive and ambitious intergovernmental forum to advance clean industrial development. At the end of the day, we seek to be a safe space for peer-to-peer exchange and eye-level collaboration to co-create and implement some of the most effective and inclusive solutions to our common challenges in climate, and also, you know, I should say in economic growth. Something for everybody to keep in mind here is that, you know, industrial decarbonization is not just a climate imperative. We know that, it depends on who you ask, like 1/3 of, you know, the carbon pollution out there does come from these hard-to-abate sectors. But we also know that there's a lot of potential to build economic strength and growth and resilience, right? And so whether we're talking about engaging with you know, those who have not historically had the opportunity to participate in some of these industrial sectors, whether we're talking about reskilling retaining existing workers. I really think that the potential is there. And you know, from talking to a lot of colleagues in the IFI space, you know, their message really is that the financial mechanisms are there, but what is really holding back the broad-scale deployment of these solutions is, well, I would say two things. Number one, a steady environment of demand signals, right? Growth of demand signals. And I would say that that is probably, you know, quite broad, you know, directly influenced by policy signals. And so that's one of the things that we work among, again, our 48 members to sort of find those areas of common practice, to create sort of a compendium of policy levers that we are all using in order to, you know, bring these lead markets into existence. And then when we have those policy signals in place, then I think the demand will follow. So a couple things that we're doing in that space. We work with the IEA and the OECD mainly as our knowledge delivery partners. So with the OECD, we've mapped existing financial and technical assistance for industrial decarbonization in EMDs, and we've developed a financial toolkit, which is a repository of economic de-risking and financial instruments for industrial decarbonization. This tool is already being applied quite broadly by governments and stakeholders in this space. We're going to have an update actually to it this year, so please stay tuned there. But from a lot of our stakeholders, what we've heard back is that based on those who have been engaging with the report, there's demand not only for a better understanding of the status quo, but also for practical evidence-based tools and guidelines. And so building on this, we're working on it. The OECD this year is working on practical guidance for establishing and operationalizing country platforms as a way to accelerate the creation of financing of impactful projects. The other thing I'll say is that, you know, we've launched, you know, really from the we've proceeded from the very beginning with a clear understanding that high-level policy dialogues are a necessary but not sufficient condition to, you know, enable the creation of these markets. So in other words, we need a sizable and concrete support offer to sort of accompany the blah blah, and I say that advisedly, knowing that I'm talking to a room full of negotiators for the most part. But looking forward to this year, for COP31, what we see is a need to unlock investment and scale through concrete policy demand signals. And so we are looking forward to working with many here in the room and with some other of the initiatives out there, whether it be through the Open Coalition that Brazil launched at COP30 last year, whether it be through the Belém Declaration and the working group, where I've seen some of my UNIDO colleagues around. You know, we're working very hard to make sure that we are greetings that we are providing in the Climate Club the sort of policy dialogue that is going to supplement these conversations and these peer-to-peer efforts. Last but not least, I'll just say I think we are starting to see some of these efforts bear fruit. You know, if you look at even some of the projects out there in the pipeline, like in Namibia, where you know you see 15,000 tons of direct reduced iron that is green as an existing success, and they're looking as far as I understand it, they have a feasibility study in the pipeline now to scale up to 1 million tons of green iron through DRI in the coming years. And I think that really is proof positive that when you take a productive technology neutral approach towards finding the right policy solutions in various different spaces that are going to enable the development of lead markets for these low carbon and net zero technologies, the successes do follow. So anyway, interested in hearing the thoughts from folks around the room today. Interested in getting the chance, hopefully, to react as well and having a fruitful discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael, for trigger our discussions. So the floor is open. Please, if you wish to make any intervention, just raise your flag or virtual hands from the online participants. I think the scheduled time is we need to go back by 12:30 to have a plenary. So please, we have 45 minutes at least. But of course, if we have more to say, that we will adjust the time. But let's try to make best use of our time of this 45 minutes. Yes, Saudi Arabia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the guiding questions related to technology development and transfer, as well as capacity building, we want to share a few reflections from Saudi Arabia's experiences, as well as some of the challenges. So one key takeaway is that technology transfer is most effective when it goes beyond access to equipment and focuses on building in-country capabilities. In our experience, real value comes from knowledge transfer, operational expertise, and long-term partnerships, rather than one-off technology deployment. This is particularly important for complex solutions like CCUS and industrial digitalization, which we've tackled yesterday, where performance depends heavily on local adaptation and operational understanding. We also have seen that deploying technologies within integrated systems help accelerate learning and scaling. For example, implementing solutions within industrial clusters allows for shared infrastructure and coordinated development, while also creating environments where knowledge and experience can be transferred more effectively across facilities. On capacity building, a key lesson is the importance of developing local technical expertise along with technology deployment. Initiatives focused on training, digital skills, and workforce deployment and reskilling, including through dedicated platforms and partnerships, have helped ensure that technologies are not only installed, but also optimized and sustained over time. Another important point is that technology transfer should remain flexible and responsive to national circumstances. Solutions need to be adaptable to local industrial structures, resource availabilities, and development priorities, rather than based on uniform approaches. From our perspective, strengthening collaboration between industry, government, and knowledge institutions is also critical, and that could be exemplified in some of the examples that we mentioned yesterday of solutions led by the industry, solutions led by research centers, and in collaboration with the government that led to key breakthroughs, specifically when it comes to CCUS as well. Overall, we see the effective technology development and transfer depends on capacity, partnerships, and system-level integration with a strong focus on practical implementation and long-term sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia, for sharing your thoughts on that. Yes, Norway, please.
Thank you. And Saudi Arabia's intervention is just a good starting point for what I was going to say, because I mostly agree with what we heard, but I was going to talk a little bit on how we try to solve the creating in-country capabilities and knowledge. Because there are barriers. They are both, of course, could be theoretical barriers, but also real-life barriers that we see in technology development and transfer and capacity building, and that is human skills, and there are the costs, of course, and in some cases there's an issue of sharing confidential information, which is not possible, but would be very important for learning, which is also connected in some ways to IPRs. And of course, the lack of piloting of new technologies. So, and this seems like we are doing the same kind of solutions for everything, but Norway, the Norwegian government created a company for testing technologies, capture technologies for CCS. So this was the precursor to what I described yesterday. And this company is called Technology Center Mongstad. And this is a place where industry and the government are owners of this company that are testing diverse technologies for capturing CO2. When this was created, the Norwegian government offered shares in this company to companies from developing countries for a very low ownership share. So it wouldn't be a lot of cost, but still they would be equal partners in the company, getting the same output as all the other members or owners of the company. And in the company, Sasol was the South African company accepted, and they bought a share of 2.44%. So it's not a big share. And they joined the company. They sent over, because the company is located in Norway, so they sent the experts and PhD students and others to work alongside the experts from the other international companies that were part of this, like Equinor, and you had Total, I think, was part of it, and others. So, and Shell. And so they learned from by doing. They shared experience with their coworkers. They got all the learnings from the piloting, equal basis, so they could take all this knowledge with them back when they went back to South Africa and were looking on how to reduce emissions via CCS in South Africa. And also, another byproduct of being an owner of this company is that you get user rights to the technologies that were piloted. So it was kind of 2 for 1 in some sense. So it was a very interesting exercise. South Africa is still working on CCS. They have not done it yet, but I was just there a month ago, and they are still talking about this experience as a very interesting way of sharing knowledge, but through being in the same company. So, because it's different being company to company or being inside the same company, sharing information within the company. So I would just wanted to raise this as one way of, it's not directly, it's not ODA or it's not development aid, it's real pure cooperation on an equal basis, but it's still technology development and transfer, and it's still building knowledge in the country that you are working with, or in the companies from that country you're working with. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing this. I think it's quite a new mode of cooperation. Belgium, please.
Hello everyone again. So Belgium is one of the EU member states, as you know, so I will largely speak to EU mechanisms. First of all, starting with the EU itself, and a bit linked to the intervention before about the importance of stable long-term policy frameworks, the same very much applies to finance, of course. Again, to give certainty to private investors and industries as to what expect in the coming years. And in the EU, we work to that end with 7-year multi-annual financial framework. So you have a 7-year budget planning, basically, that gives certainty within this budget cycle, while of course still leaving flexibilities to adapt on an annual basis. And what we see there as important for climate finance is to dedicate a specific part of the budget to climate investments. And in the previous multi-annual financial framework, the one that's currently still running, actually, that was 30% in the EU. And we see such a long-term planning cycle as essential for also leveraging private side finance in an optimal way. One of the ways the EU uses its budget for climate finance is through the European Investment Bank, which is the EU's main lending arm, and a major multilateral lender in the world's leading provider of climate finance. So the EIB offers loans, guarantees, equity investors, and advisory services. And this also ties a bit back to the icebreaker we heard before, that you have different technologies in different stages, different companies in different stages, and that it's very important to tailor financial products also to the maturity of a technology and the maturity of a company and a specific investment project. Sometimes working with public-private partnerships, sometimes working simply with subsidies, sometimes working with grants, sometimes with loans, etc. What also, I mean, I'm not going to talk about the whole carbon pricing again and the use ETS, but as mentioned before, it's a good way also to raise funds that then can be reinvested in the transition. And within the EU, we use this for several budgets, actually. First of all, the Just Transition Fund, which is used to make sure that no one is left behind in the transition, very much linked to what we heard before with regards to reskilling and upskilling programs. For example, we have the Modernization Fund as a program to make sure that energy systems are modernized. We have the Innovation Fund to drive early stage technologies, etc. Maybe an interesting novel development in the EU that's still very junior, but that was mentioned in the previous breakout is the concept of price for difference contracts, where if we work with carbon pricing and the price is set by the market, that entails a certain risk, especially for technologies which are not entirely mature yet, or where the green premium is very high and the uncertainty of the future carbon price can be a barrier to investment because it makes the return on investment uncertain. The price for difference contracts are actually a policy measure to give a certain carbon price basically to investors. So if the future carbon price ends up being much lower than the fixed contract, then the government provides the premium, ensuring a fixed carbon price, but also vice versa, if the future carbon price would be higher than the fixed agreed price, it's paid back into the government's coffers. With regards to technology development, Horizon Europe is the EU's main research and innovation program, having a strong focus on climate technology also. And importantly, it also has a strong international cooperation component with the EU's global approach to research and innovation. It's possible for third countries to basically join the Horizon Europe program and benefit from its technology developments, and also collaborate with EU partners there. Another example, maybe specifically for hydrogen, is an initiative called the European Hydrogen Bank, which launches auctions in the form of fixed premium payments upon verified and certified production of renewable hydrogen. And it's a way to provide financial support to the development of green hydrogen, basically, and rewarding the most cost-efficient green hydrogen producers. With regards to capacity building under the EU's Green Deal industrial plan, there is the concept of net zero industry academies, also focused on just transition and upskilling and reskilling programs. So the idea is really to run EU-wide training programs, basically. There is a set of different academies, and each academy is aimed at training 100,000 learnings within a 3-year period. And maybe I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for sharing the experiences from European Union. Yes, Costa Rica, please. Oh, sorry. Colombia, please.
We are both island countries, so I wouldn't mind being a Costa Rica delegation. Thank you for giving me the floor again. Colombia would like to highlight that enabling greater mitigation ambition in industry requires addressing systemic constraints across finance, technology, and human capacities, while building on practical solutions that have already demonstrated results. In this regard, aligning economic and climate policy signals has proved essential. Instruments such as carbon pricing, mentioned by other colleagues, have helped incentivize industries to adopt mitigation measures. At the same time, international partnerships, such as the engagement with initiatives like the Climate Club, have played a catalytic role by linking domestic priorities with external financing and technical expertise. Particularly with the Climate Club, Colombia, through the global matchmaking platform, has been able to connect these national priorities with international support, enabling the development of concrete projects, including co-processing in cement plants, and mobilizing over $2 million in cooperation with partners such as the World Bank and UNIDO. Despite the advances, significant challenges remain. Scaling up climate finance continues to be constrained by a limited pipeline of bankable projects and insufficient institutional and technical capacity to meet international funding requirements. These challenges are compounded by high upfront investment needs, infrastructure gaps, and dependence of imported technologies, which together limit the pace for deployment. In addition, gaps in the availability of tracking of information on financial flows and technological needs affect decision-making and slow implementation. To address these barriers, Colombia emphasizes the importance of strengthening project preparation and financial structuring capacities, enhancing coordination mechanisms at both domestic and international levels to better align support with national needs, and reinforcing MRV systems for climate finance to improve transparency, trust, and effectiveness. Ultimately, there is an urgent need to reform the international financial architecture to effectively support industrial decarbonization in developing countries. Current systems remain fragmented, difficult to access, and insufficiently aligned with the scale and speed required for the transition, failing to adequately address the key barriers such as the high upfront costs, long investment cycles, and the perceived risk of emerging technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia, for sharing with us the experiences. Yeah, we have Annika from Sweden who is still with us online. Annika, please, you have the floor.
Here you go. Yeah, I'm still here, but I should go to bed very soon, I think. Getting very tired, unfortunately. First, I wanted to share some examples on finance. In Sweden, we have a loan guarantee scheme for green investments. And in addition, there are different national support schemes, which aims at reducing emissions in industry. One of them is called the Industrial Leap, and it aims to support research and innovation, pilot and demonstration plants with the main focus on reduced process emissions in the industry, hydrogen and electrification, carbon capture and storage, as well as negative emissions such as bio-CCS. It's financed through the Swedish government and the EU fund called Next Generation EU, and the project participating also have to contribute with a significant portion of the project's cost. Another support scheme called the Climate Leap Initiative is primarily directed at those industry activities that are not covered by the EU's emissions trading scheme and provides investment funding for local and regional emission reduction measures, such as charging infrastructure, bioenergy plants, conversion from fossil fuels, and circular solutions. There is also governmental investment in energy research and innovation through a number of programs. One example at Luleå University of Technology, there's a project that has received funding to look into the development of research and energy efficiency industrial clusters in northern Sweden, including taking social systems into consideration. This region in the north is facing a major transformation with new technologies such as fossil-free steel production, large-scale hydrogen production, and industrial symbiosis contributes to a circular economy because waste or surplus heat in one business can be raw material or energy efficiency in another. And in developing such industrial clusters, collaboration between all the actors plays a crucial role, both to create environmental and social benefits, but also to create new business opportunities. And lastly, I would like to take the opportunity to give an example of technology development within the hard-to-abate cement sector. There is a Swedish company, Semvision, that produces cement using only circular materials. The method is based on traditional cement chemistry, but modernized. Their product, called Rement, consists of 2 cement binders produced from industrial residual products instead of virgin limestone. And this is an ideal example of how residues can be used as a resource in circular economy. In addition, Vision has developed a technology to electrify the production process to remove the emissions associated with the manufacturing process. And the result is cement with up to 95% CO2 reduction. And this production is now in a demonstration phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika, and I wish you can have a good sleep. Any? We have someone from online participants. Jorge Gonzalez, I think. If you can take the floor and identify yourself. Jorge, please, you have the floor.
Do you hear me well there?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my fellow colleagues. So, I come here to speak on behalf of Cuba's technical unit for carbon markets. So, I'm going to share a perspective from a country that is attempting something extremely difficult: jumpstarting an economy through environmentally friendly development models amidst severe economic constraints. A first lesson we have learned from our decarbonization efforts is that carbon markets are not only a climate instrument, they are a development instrument. For countries like Cuba, facing severe fiscal constraction, restricted access to credit, climate impacts that already cost us between 5 to 10% of our GDP in some years, carbon markets offer a rare opportunity to mobilize external finance without increasing debt. The second lesson that we have drawn from this process is that institutional readiness matters even more than economic conditions. Even in crisis, we have advanced national MRB systems, a regulatory framework aligned with Article 6, and a dedicated technical unit. This has shown us that credibility is built through governance and reliable institutional framework, and not by sheer economic profitability. The third lesson that I would like to share with you is that capacity building is not a preliminary step. It is the core of the model. In a context of limited liquidity, human development and knowledge has proved to be the most transformative of investments. But let me be clear, our main challenges are not technical limitations, but external financial restrictions. Cuba's restricted participation in many global financial mechanisms, even when these mechanisms are theoretically universal, reduces our ability to blend carbon revenues with concessional finance, which is essential for nature-based solution. International banking restrictions, corresponding banking laws, and compliance over deterrence creates delays, higher costs, and in some cases, the impossibility of receiving payments. These barriers not only affect the public sector, but also local project developers and community organizations. And of course, it takes a heavy toll on investors' confidence and their willingness to invest in Cuba. Despite these constraints, Cuba is demonstrating that a country under severe financial restrictions can still build a high-integrity carbon market architecture. Our approach here has three pillars. First, strong national institutions to guarantee investor confidence. This would reduce risk for investors and ensure environmental integrity even in a volatile global context. Second, a developed model centered on soft infrastructure, because we cannot rely on large capital inflows. We have to focus on what we can scale: robust MRB systems, train local experts, standardized methodologies, and community-based implementations capacities. Third, strategic alliances to overcome financial isolation. This is a strategy that we have implemented in order to provide certain security for our transactions. This is essential for countries which are facing external restrictions as we are. Cuba's experience shows that decarbonizations can be promoted even under extreme financial hardship, when there is a cohesive approach that combines strength, transparency, and valuable human potential. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jorge, for your intervention, that you're sharing your views. Saudi Arabia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor again. Just wanted to highlight maybe a few other best practices and challenges that Saudi Arabia looks at from the perspective of finance. So the first example comes from the Middle East Green Initiative, which is an international initiative which promotes mitigation and adaptation in the Middle East region. It integrates the private sector into projects as simple as planting trees in countries facing desertification, which is a huge challenge for the region. Such projects provide cooling to hotter regions and end up sequestering emissions effectively, contributing to the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement, as well as adaptation and resilience. The Middle East Green Initiative aims to target emissions rather than sources of emissions, ensuring continuous economic growth while effectively addressing the different circumstances and priorities of the various member countries. So you can see in it clearly the trade-off, not necessarily trade-off, the co-benefits of having a mitigation solution as well as adaptation for the region. It is quite significant when you come to visit the region. The second example is around the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and how it's taken strides in developing and enabling policy landscapes for finance climate action in line with the NDCs. In late 2024, the Kingdom launched its Sustainable Financing Framework, which aims at implementing holistic and harmonized programs, policies, and initiatives and collaboration platforms to address climate change challenges at a national and a regional level, as well as on the global level. This framework came up with the inauguration of the Green Bonds, which as of February 2025 recorded an oversubscription of over 6x. So this framework encompasses the circular carbon economy, engaging in industrial, urban, and civilian approaches of addressing climate change and sustainable development. In line with the best available science, the Kingdom has also developed a regulatory environment that harnesses the mobilization of finance at scale domestically. Industrial decarbonization is evolving more rapidly as the Sustainable Finance Framework targets cutting-edge abatement and removal technologies in line with the Kingdom's NDC. The third example comes from Saudi Arabia's effort in uploading its third NDC with a dedicated section on Article 2, Paragraph 1C of the Paris Agreement, which speaks to making finance flows consistent with pathways toward low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. The NDC benefits from Article 4.7 of the Paris Agreement by realizing the full potential of adaptation action, resulting in mitigation co-benefits, which was mentioned earlier. This demonstrates that there are infinite ways of reducing emissions across a wide range and variety of contexts in line with national circumstances. In the context of mobilizing and scaling finance technology deployment and capacity building, a key challenge lies in the distortion of financial and trade flows that disadvantages developing nations in speaking to some of the challenges that is faced. Unilateral climate-related measures risk shifting financial flows from developing to developed economies, where revenues are retained and potentially recycled as finance and continued support for developing nations. This places an additional burden on developing countries and fails to account for existing negative financial flows, including debt servicing and illicit flows. At the same time, illicit financial flows continues to distort their trade by enabling profit shifting away from developing countries. While some practices are illegal, others operate within legal frameworks, yet still undermine equitable outcomes, particularly in value chains where resources are extracted in low-cost jurisdictions, sold in higher-value markets, limiting the benefit retained in country of origin. These dynamics are also evident in part of the climate-related industrial landscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. I think I have Australia, please, Mia.
Thanks very much. I've jumped rooms. I think people are too lazy today to walk down the stairs. So I talked a lot in the earlier session about some of the policies and programs Australia has in place to incentivise and de-risk private finance. I also talked about some of our ODA programs and climate finance, as well as some of our trade partnerships. So I won't repeat all of those points here, just to say I think there's some really interesting commonalities with some of the interventions I've heard today. For example, Australia has a sustainable finance framework and taxonomy, which is helpful to hear from others as well. I thought I'd talk about something that mostly here that I haven't raised much yet, which is one of the key challenges that we have with industrial transition. is that Australia's remote and regional communities are disproportionately impacted by this. This is because most of our industrial sector is located in very remote communities. And this is a real barrier both from the perspective of just transition and equity, because there are communities in very remote areas who are completely reliant on heavy emitting industries for their economic health. So the transition itself can be a challenge, but also from the perspective of making sure that we have the right skills in place to support industrial decarbonisation and the transition. So one solution that's really worked in Australia's context is that we've set up a specific agency called the Net Zero Economy Agency, which is specifically focused on helping the communities who are most impacted by the transition to harness the positive opportunities of the transition. And that includes remote and regional communities and Indigenous communities as well. And some of the specific things that this agency has done include, spending a lot of time in these regions to have early and comprehensive consultation with communities to understand priorities and concerns, as well as to work with other government agencies on really specific planning around job transition and workforce and skills. So, for example, the Net Zero Economy Agency has worked with our employment department for a economy-wide energy jobs transition plan. So I need to look up what that is actually specifically called. Energy Industry Job Plan Review. But then on top of that, there are also much more specific and targeted regional workforce transition plans. So these focus on specific regions, and they're focused on the communities who are most impacted by the industrial transition and by closures of emissions-intensive industries. So this provides things like career guidance, skills training and reskilling support, financial and planning advice, among other activities. So this combined strategy of having these really region-specific plans alongside these broader national plans to ensure we have a coordinated approach to reskilling and retraining to make sure we can enable industrial and energy transition is really important and is leading to some really good outcomes in Australia. Thanks.
Thank you, Australia, for sharing with us your practice, your challenges, and practice how to address that. I now invite European Union, Belgium or European Union, please.
Thanks. Given that we still have some time left, I thought I would elaborate a bit on something I haven't really addressed yet the past few days, but was already a bit referred to indirectly, and that's the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is for us an essential piece of the carbon pricing puzzle. We've spoken elaborately the last 2 days about the importance of carbon pricing, among others, to address the green premium that we see, especially in the industrial sector. And for us, the carbon border adjustment mechanism is one of the key landmark climate measures to ensure that we can reach climate neutrality by the 2050. CBAM addresses the risk of carbon leakage, of course, which is essential when you establish carbon pricing systems. And it's also an instrument to, in the end, promote decarbonization more broadly. It's designed to ensure that imports are treated in an equivalent manner within the EU as EU produce itself. Now, we know that there has been some international concern with regards to CBAM, and that's also why the EU has extensively spoken about it with international partners and partially simplified and adjusted the CBAM regulation in such a manner that from this year onwards, imports with annual CBAM covered products of up to 50 tons per importer will be now outside of the scope of CBAM, so it's reducing the scope of CBAM, and thereby around 91% of importers, so the vast majority of importers will become exempted from CBAM, while less than 1% of related emissions will fall out of the scope. So what we're now doing is really focusing CBAM on large importers, but which also cover 99% of imported emissions. Also maybe still good to say is that, of course, CBAM was designed with a focus on energy and emission-intensive sectors, and therefore automatically primarily affects the more industrialized and developed economies. And we also see this as important in the context, actually, of the transition away from fossil fuels, implemented in a just and inclusive manner over time, because it increasingly provides socio-economic opportunities on a national, regional, and global scale. Accelerating renewable energy generation comes with various co-benefits, as already spoken about by several others today and yesterday, such as the creation of new local jobs and businesses in the renewable energy generation ecosystem and health improvements due to less air pollution. And contrary to the delayed mitigation action would lock in high emission infrastructure, raises the risk of stranded assets and cost escalation, including additional pressure on fiscal budgets related to the volatility of fossil fuel prices, which reduces the feasibility of keeping 1.5 within reach and increases loss and damage cost, as well as the need for adaptation. The volatility of fossil fuel prices exposes vulnerable populations to greater uncertainties, and therefore we think that reducing dependence on fossil fuels in a just and inclusive manner over time decreases energy poverty and improves access to energy, ensuring that no one is left behind, while at the same time assuring that efficient and effective and sustainable use of both fiscal and private funds.
Yeah, thank you for your response and your sharing of your views. I would like to invite Dominic Republic, please.
Thank you, Chair. From our national experiences, we would like to highlight key best practices. From our national experience, we also have innovative finance frameworks and investment planning as a key enablers. In this regard, the Dominican Republic is implementing its Climate Investment Fund investment plan under the Accelerating Coal Transition, which provides a comprehensive country-driven roadmap to transition away from coal while ensuring just and inclusive transition. This investment plan is structured around 3 pillars. 1, strengthening governance and regulatory frameworks, including the development of carbon market regulations aligned with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Advancing a just transition with targeted programs for workers, communities, and vulnerable groups, including reskilling, social protection, and responsive measures. Scaling infrastructure investment is the 3rd point, including the early retirement of coal-fired power plants, the deployment of renewable energy, energy storage systems, and transmission of upgrades. Importantly, the CIF investment plan leverages blended finance, combining concessional resources with multilateral development banks and private sector investment, helping to mobilize over $1 billion in investment needs for the energy transition. It also promotes strong public-private collaboration and stakeholder engagement, ensuring ownership and long-term sustainability. On results-based climate finance and carbon markets, the Dominican Republic has demonstrated that high-integrity, inclusive approaches can unlock tangible outcomes. Through our participation in the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, we have successfully received results-based payments for verified emission reductions, amounting to approximately 840,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. This process has been underpinned by robust environmental and social safeguards, strong MRV systems, and the use of advanced satellite technologies for monitoring forest degradation. Importantly, these resources are also being reinvested through an inclusive benefit sharing plan that supports local communities, sustainable livelihoods, and job creation. On institutional strengthening and enabling environments, the country has taken decisive steps to align its governance framework with the Paris Agreement. Through there's a National Decree 35825, we have strengthened our national authority to facilitate participation in carbon markets under Article 6, while also advancing a pilot emission trading system under the UNFCCC SIACAS initiative. These efforts are complemented by growing private sector engagement, including voluntary carbon market initiatives that are helping to build readiness for international carbon markets. In parallel, also, we are advancing just transition approaches, particularly in the energy sector, or investment planning under the Climate Investment Fund's Accelerate Coal Transition Program integrates governance reforms, infrastructure investment, and targeted social programs for workers and community. While studies show that the transition to renewable energy can generate net economic benefits and substantial job creation, achieving this requires sustained investment and long-term planning. To address these barriers, the Dominican Republic underscores the importance of enhancing access to concessional and blended finance at scale, strengthening international cooperation under Article 6 to ensure environmental integrity and equitable participation, expanding capacity building initiatives, including for workers, financial institutions, and public entities, promoting technology transfer and innovative partnerships, particularly for energy storage, digital MRV systems, and nature-based solutions. Economic assessment in the Dominican Republic shows that a renewable-based transition could actually generate net benefits over $2.7 billion, reduce generation cost, avoid 140 million tons of emissions, and create up to 160,000 jobs by 2050. The Dominican Republic is advancing the development of a national green taxonomy as well as a key tool to enhance access to climate finance by providing clear and science-based definitions of environmentally sustainable activities. This taxonomy reduces uncertainty, also strengthens investor confidence, and facilitates the alignment of financial flows with national climate priorities. In conclusion, the experience of the Dominican Republic demonstrates that integrated, inclusive, institutionally grounded approaches can also deliver both mitigation outcomes and sustainable development benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominican Republic. I would like now to invite colleagues from Turkey, please.
Dear co-chair, distinguished colleagues, greetings. I am Umut from Turkey, and I would like to briefly highlight Turkey's ongoing efforts and progress in industrial decarbonization. In Turkey, the cement and iron and steel sectors play a central role in the industrial emissions, accounting for more than half of the total emissions from the industry. In this context, these sectors are considered as key priorities in ongoing decarbonization efforts. And while technological solutions are evolving, their large-scale deployment remains closely linked to access to finance, as well as enabling policy environments. And in this context, several sectoral low-carbon pathways have been developed in our country to guide the transformation of key industries, and initiatives such as Turkey Industrial Decarbonization Investment Platform, we call it TIDIP, and it aims to mobilize international finance and support the development of bankable decarbonization projects. And it aims to mobilize up to 5 billion euros investments by 2030, and it is expected to contribute emission reductions of approximately 20 million tons per year. And it supports Turkey's industrial decarbonization efforts and it will play a key role in accelerating implementation. Additionally, Turkey is serving as co-chair of the Climate Club over the next 2 years, during which it's actively contributing to advancing work on industrial decarbonization. In this capacity, Turkey is also actively engaging global matchmaking platform under the Climate Club. We are working on 2 concrete projects right now. One is focusing on the deployment of the carbon capture and storage technologies in the cement sector, And another project is assessing the potential for hydrogen use in the iron and steel sector. In light of these considerations, looking ahead to COP31, green industrialization is expected to emerge as a key priority under the COP31 action agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues from Turkey, and also share with us one of the priority of the COP31. I think it's very important for everyone to get prepared. Singapore, please.
Hey, Chair, thank you for allowing me to speak. I know we're meeting time, so I'll keep it short. Just wanted to make 2 points, I think, on the observations between, and the intersection between policy and how that clear direction of travel is able to sort of bring in investment and also finance. So for Singapore, I think we have a clear direction of travel. We've set our NDCs for 2030, 2035, and then how that eventually leads to net zero by 2050. Our carbon tax is also a form of signaling to steer producers and consumers away from carbon-intensive goods and services. And the revenue that's collected from carbon tax is hypothecated and it's set aside for measures that support decarbonization efforts and the transition to a green economy. We've also signaled very clearly that we intend to buy Article 6 credits as part of our NDC, so that is able to channel finance to areas where there is ready capacity for mitigation. And I also wanted to highlight that in terms of capacity building, we also had a Green Skills Committee, so that was established in 2023. And earlier this year, they published a report on what are the green skills that we anticipate and are worth investing in. And certainly industry, especially in energy efficiency in the sector, is going to be a big area. The second part is about how government has also been signaling that we're going to be a close partner with industry through this decarbonization journey. So for example, we have set up consortiums to study cross-border carbon capture and storage through our Pathfinder projects in ammonia and low-carbon hydrogen. It's also been a process of discovery of cost and risks, and also setting out that quite clearly between what the cost and risk sharing that government will bear, and also industry will bear. And then we can also facilitate that through regulatory sandboxes. So for example, we have one on biomethane, so that enables power generation companies to test biomethane as a drop-in fuel without costly infrastructure. So it's through these close partnerships that we're able to learn new challenges, but also co-develop options and solutions. And I think through talking with industries, we've really learned that different pathways can be optimal depending on what your policy priorities are. So for example, in Singapore, land optimization is a big consideration for us, and that informs what type of infrastructure we want to develop, and also whether there feedback. So we have very, very direct feedback on what support is needed in terms of maybe regulatory MRV frameworks for emerging technologies. So yes, just wanted to share those 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Singapore, for sharing with us your experiences. If there's no more requests of the floor. Yeah, may I ask Jorge from the online participants, do you wish to take the floor again? Or it's a legacy hand?
I'm sorry, it's a legacy hand.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you.
So I think if there's no more requests for the floor, we can go back to the So the information I got is the colleagues are still having their discussion upstairs. So it seems we can have our early lunch, and we will do the report back at 2 o'clock when we come back to the plenary for the IFE. Yes, please, you also want to take the floor? Sure, absolutely. Please.
Thank you very much. I would like to say some words with regard to barriers that have been encountered in the decarbonizing industry. I would like to say that effective global climate action should focus on reducing GHG emissions rather than restricting particular energy sources, and that technology-neutral approach should be implemented. Talking about a massive transition to renewables, we should say that restructuring power systems to rely primarily on variable renewable energy require massive investments in generation, equipment, grid modernization, and storage. Moreover, operational challenges remain due to variability of renewable output and the need for backup thermal capacities. In several sectors, particularly transport and heavy industry, commercially scalable alternatives remain limited. In transport alone, petroleum products represent more than 90% of global energy use. Therefore, a balanced approach to decarbonizing industries should be implemented. With regard to barriers, limited access to finance, technology, and investment remains a key barrier to implementing climate action and decarbonizing industry. Unilateral measures, including cross-border carbon adjustment mechanisms and similar restrictions, create barriers to markets, investments, and technologies. According to WTO, energy-intensive industries account for more than 20% of global manufactured goods trade. Additional carbon-related requirements could affect significant trade volumes and create new obstacles to development. Thank you.
Thank you, Russia Federation. I think that could come to the end of our discussion for this morning. Yeah, so I guess we can go to lunch. So yes, meet as a plenary at 2 o'clock. So bon appétit. Thank you for your participation.